Right, thank you very much, Shadi, and thank you particularly for getting through it so quickly, because we started a bit late and I want to leave as much time as possible for Ben to answer all your questions. So I will be equally brief, but my name's John O'Leary. I've been involved with the QS rankings from the start in 2004 and before that, actually, and I'm a member of the advisory board for the current rankings. So I wanted to just give you a brief exposition about the subject rankings, which came out a couple of days ago, and in particular the performance of the Middle East, the Arab world and Africa, since that's the focus of this conference. Hang on. First of all, the importance of subject rankings. I think people, because the headlines tend to get captured by the full institutional rankings, think that they're what really matters. But actually to students, increasingly it's becoming clear that it's the subject rankings, and by them I mean particularly the QS ones, which are much larger and much more efficient and effective, I think, than the other ones that are available on a global scale. This was a survey done by Hobson's, which is this division of it is now part of QS, which showed that although the tuition fees were the most important things, if you can't afford the tuition fees you can't go, after that the subject ranking was more important to international students than the university ranking. And in a larger survey that QS in the new Hobson's division carried out last year among international students, the top reason for going to university was about the subject. There were many other reasons, their future career, social pressures, all sorts of other motivations, but the subject was at the top. And when it came to the decision-making process about which university they were going to choose, again, more than half, the subject was the main motivation. The country they were going to go to came next, and the university actually was third. But the subject was the most important element. So looking at the subject rankings which have just come out, they are a huge enterprise. 4,500 universities have been examined in one field or another for this present set of rankings. 1,100, more than 1,100, were actually ranked, had they passed all the thresholds to get into one of the 48 now rankings that were published, 2 more than in 2017. Amongst those, 200 million citations, and the universities in those 1,100 came from 151 different countries. So really a vast piece of research. As you'll probably know if you've looked at them in previous years, they are all different. You can't apply exactly the same criteria to all different subjects, because in the sciences there are a lot of citations, in the arts and in many of the social sciences there are not. H index is a meaningful thing again in the sciences, much less so in the arts subjects. So without going into detail, I realise you won't be able to read all the different subjects. The darker band is reputation, i.e. the academic and employer polling. The lighter colours are citations and the H index. On the left we have the arts and humanities, nearly all reputation scoring. In the middle, engineering, technology, life sciences and medicine and the natural sciences, much more influenced by citations and the H index of the academics concerned. The 2 stars there are our 2 new subjects, which incidentally are classics and library and information management on the right. Those mostly reputational scoring. Same goes for the paper thresholds, for the same reason that there isn't the same amount of data available in arts subjects as there is in medicine, for instance, or engineering. Medicine has the highest threshold for entry to be considered for the ranking at 190. several subjects on the right-hand side there. You're not required to have any papers. And those are including art and design, performance arts, and social policy. But again, there's a gradual move according to which subject we're looking at. What's new in the 2018 edition? Now a 6-year citation window, extended slightly. The employer indicator is no longer weighted between international and domestic responses. 2 new subjects, as I've just mentioned, classics and librarianship. 7 new universities at number 1 in their particular subject. And 500 plus new entries in the 48 tables. Those are not all new universities moving up. Some of them are in other tables. And it's also influenced by the fact that this year's exercise has been able to extend the scope of some subjects, so we've got more universities being able to get into some subjects. 22 institutions, mostly universities, but also a couple of specialist institutions, at number 1 in their subject. Harvard, by far the biggest of those, 16, MIT at 14, and dominating the engineering and much of the science subjects. Oxford with 5, the only other university top in more than 1. So that it illustrates the value of the subject rankings, that all those different universities, some of which are not terribly high in the overall university rankings, and indeed some of which don't even qualify for them because they're too specialist, get their place in the sun. And also we're able to advise students who are looking at the one subject, they're not looking at engineering if they want to do sociology, where is the particular place that they can have confidence in for their subject. So we've got new entrants there in Sheffield. My university has come in the new librarianship one. And then you've got the University of Nevada and Las Vegas. We've got all sorts of different universities that you won't see necessarily at the top of the overall world university rankings. In the top 10, it's quite a slightly different position, but again dominated by US and UK universities. Actually, Cambridge and followed by Oxford are the ones that are in the most different tables subject-wise. Cambridge in 37 out of the 48 subjects that are ranked this year, and of course doesn't offer many of the other ones. But all of the ones on that left-hand column are from the US or the UK. A bit more diversity in the right-hand column, where you find Toronto, ETH Zurich, Tokyo, and the 2 Australian universities, ANU and Melbourne, all in the top 10 in at least 4, if not more, different tables. Countries, that follows the same. US by far the most, the UK and Australia after that. I mean, US and UK well ahead of all the rest. Switzerland, Canada, Singapore with 12, the Netherlands with 10, and the rest lower. So that rather illustrates the problem that you have in the Arab world and in Africa. The universities that dominate the top of the world university rankings are also, of course, very powerful in many of the other ones. You're having to compete with them all over again in many of the subjects that are ranked, the 48. But this is the region, or the 2 regions, Africa and the Arab world, 216 departments placed somewhere in those 48 subjects, up from 187 last year and 126 in 2016. Now, of course, that's influenced by the fact that there are more universities ranked in total, as I mentioned, because it's a bigger exercise. But it does show encouraging progress in the two regions, and two new countries represented this year, Qatar and Tanzania. In Africa, 139 placings of those from 7 countries. I'll go on to the Arab world and you'll see that there's a complication because Egypt's in both, but the rest of it is fairly clear. But it does show that although there are 139 placings, they are mostly from South Africa, 103 of those, and from only 6 universities within South Africa. Egypt has 27 of the rest, up from 18 last year, from 5 universities, but predominantly from a couple of them. Uganda 3, but from 1 university, and Kenya 3, also from 1 university. Ghana, Nigeria and Tanzania, all from 1 university. So a pretty low number of universities altogether, even though 139 is up from 130 last year, and relatively encouraging. The Arab world, same sort of story, 76, 100 if you include Egypt, placings altogether. 52 of those from Saudi Arabia, up from 48 last year, from 5 universities. The Lebanon 8, but again all from 2 actually universities rather than 1. UAE 2, Jordan 8, and Qatar the new entry. Neighbouring countries in the region, this thing including the faculty rankings, 102 placings in Israel, which does very well. Turkey 64, also very good, and Iran 18, also quite still moving up. The top performers, the University of Cape Town, 35 of those are from there, which is again a pretty encouraging total for UCT, which probably doesn't offer many of the other subjects. WITS, the top 3 there, all South African universities. WITS 21, Stellenbosch 18, and then we get into Cairo, which has done a lot better this year with 16 placings within the rankings, up from 10 last year. And then the Saudi Arabian universities, KSU 16, King Fahd 12, which is again a pretty good total when you think there's a much narrower curriculum at King Fahd. 12 also at KAU and 11 at KAUST. In terms of the performances, these are not the numbers. This is the position that they achieved. Cape Town just outside the top 10 for development studies, and you see development studies also a top 20 finish for WITS, top 50 at Stellenbosch and also at Makerere in Uganda. But these are all the region's top 50 finishes, mostly from South Africa, 2 or 3 from Saudi Arabia. But again, quite a narrow field and a fairly narrow range of subjects, mostly development subject studies, mining engineering, King Saud now in dentistry, that's a new entry, and geography, the other one. So there are still gaps for the region, quite big countries and quite well-respected universities not appearing in the subject rankings at all. Morocco, Oman, Tunisia, Zambia, nowhere in any of the 48 rankings. And several subjects not, the region is not represented at all. Neither of the 2 new subjects, classics and librarianship, also in performing arts, nursing and veterinary science, perhaps a gap that you'll worry about more. Nursing, you would hope that there would be universities that would appear within the region. So that's just a quick canter through, particularly from the perspective of the region. I can talk to any of you about the wider picture later in the tea break, but if we're going to get back to give Ben time to answer your questions, we need to break now for the tea break. If we could be back in 15 minutes, if possible, to give Ben an hour. So if we could be back at 4:05. Thank you very much.